Hey everyone, a very warm welcome to the session. I'm Shweta Sharma and I welcome you to Career Launcher for another session on CMAT reading comprehension and grammar. So I hope we attended the previous sessions on CMAT RC with me, wherein I explained to you how to approach an RC, how an RC might be structured, and of course the question types under any reading comprehension we have. We also discussed one of the business passages. So today we'll be covering up a quick recap on what we did earlier and then a few passages I gave you for homework. Okay, and at the same time, I would also want to see your comments in the chat box. So, just to have an insurity on if I am audible and visible to everyone, if you could please confirm. All right. Oh, all right, Vipin. Good to see your comment. Very good evening and welcome back. So, last time I told you about any RC that we have three sections to any RC. We have an introduction, we have the body of the passage, and we also have a conclusion where the author shares his or her opinion. Okay, so this might be a closed ended opinion wherein the author gives a very either didactic, that is in a preaching way of approach of how the things should be based on what the RC type is, or sometimes he might also leave it on an open-ended end where you are supposed to figure out as a reader what exactly should be the solution. For example, if the author talks about any bird, which became extinct or which is on the verge of extinction, so how should we treat certain situations? How should we go about preserving wildlife, wild animals, wild birds in certain situations when they're almost on the verge to get breach to extinction? So what should be the solution in certain cases? How should we approach certain problems? That is what an open-ended passage would look like, or where the author exactly doesn't give us his opinion but demands some suggestion from our end. That is what you say is as a conclusion or an opinion. Hi Rahul, good to see you. Rahul Kodiar. Sorry, ma'am, I couldn't attend the last lecture. That is all right. You guys can quickly just go through it once you're done with this session. You can probably go through it. It's not very different from what we're going to cover today. Yes, we did cover some questions on grammar, and today too, we'll be covering some questions on tenses. I'll be giving you a brief on how tenses are, and then we'll also approach some questions on the same. So nothing to worry in case you did not attend the previous session. In case you'd want to, please go back to the previous session. It would be CMAT session 3, and you can just go about by some RCs we covered. You can try solving them and also see what questions did we cover out there. Okay, so an RC is basically structured into three sections. We have introduction, we have body, and conclusion. Along with the conclusion, there might be opinion as well, where the author shares his views about any strategy being discussed, any political agenda being discussed, or it could be any passage from social science, humanities, philosophy based passage. It might be a passage where the author tries to talk about a female pregnant women basically consuming alcohol and what impact might it have on the fetus, right? So it might lead to some irreversible damage to the fetus brain. So all of that might come as an RC to you. Okay, and then we talked about the question types. So I told you the questions can be either direct or indirect, and specifically if we talk about CMAT, the questions would be very tough. They won't be very tough. We can simply divide them into two sorts of questions, that is local and global. Okay, so when we say local, it is specific to a particular paragraph or a context. When we say global, it is more like inferential questions, right? When it is inferential, it is based on the entire passage summary, the gist of the passage, the tone of the passage, the title of the passage. All of this covers under the global type of passage. So local and global are the two kinds of question types we have. Okay, that's one thing we can probably look at when we talk about question types. Okay, and then I also asked you to figure out the GST of the passage before you move to the questions. It's always good to figure out GST in 30 seconds because it gives you an idea of what the entire passage is about, and you do not have to reread the passage unless and until it's a contextual question type and you have to go back to the passage and read 2 lines above and 2 lines below. So when I say G, it's more like the general idea we are referring to, right? Or the summary of the passage. When I say S, it means the structure or the function of the paragraphs given, the role of each paragraph, right? And T means the tone and title. So not very tough to figure out. Once you know the attitude of the author, the tone becomes very simple to figure out. It could be either positive, it could be either negative, it could be neutral, right? So by positive, it could be laudatory, it could be appreciative, right? Or he needs to laud or applaud, basically same terminology. When it is negative, it could be caviling, it could be critical, it could be dogmatic, it could be demeaning, condescending. I'll be giving you a session. I mean, we'll have a session on the tone types, but just for you to remember for now, these are the terms you can expect, right? Denigrating is also one of the negative tone types. And when it comes to neutral, it's basically factual, or it could be objective, descriptive, even didactic. Didactic is when the author tries to teach you something, right, on the basis of some theories being shared, or it's like bonvita peene se you grow tall, right? Or anything where the author is trying to teach you. Any of the advertisements, if you pick, you'll find that the tone of the author is somewhere on the preaching side. I mean, the tone of the cast itself is very didactic there, right? And of course, narrative is also one of the uh, tone types, which is neutral. Narrative means when you have a sequential flow of events, structure of events, step one, step two, step three. First came the hens, and then came the dogs, then came the horses, then came the pigs. If you go by animal farm structure, right? So anything which goes by sequence of events, it's narrative. Didactic is when the author is trying to teach you something. Descriptive, of course, there's a lot of detailing, minute detailing of any character, any, picturesque which is being shared, or any landscape the author shares. It could be any policies the author is throwing light on. So that's descriptive. Objective is when the author is very specific about one particular thing. For example, it's a science passage, and it talks about a lot of specific theory. For example, it talks about theory of momentum, theory of relativity, right? Or three laws of motion. So it's focused on those three laws of motion, or just theory of relativity. That's it, right? Factual is when there are a lot of facts stated, a lot of numbers, stats. Not every time would the factual passage include a lot of numbers or stats, but yes, something which cannot be questioned, cannot be doubted, cannot be questioned. That is a fact. Fact is like we talk about some event which happened in the past, or the universe presence, the earth's rotation and revolution around the sun, right? Rotation around the sun. So everything is under the fact. So that's a fact that cannot be questioned. So all of these tone types are neutral, right? This is negative, and these are all positive. We'll have a session entirely on tone types one day very soon, but for now, you to remember this should help. Okay, now let's move to some passages we'll be solving today. I gave you this passage last time, if you remember. This was one of the passages we were supposed to cover. I asked you to solve the questions. If you haven't tried it, we can try it together. But in case you have already tried it, we probably can move to another passage. I would just want to know in the comments if you want me to do the passage with you today, or have we read the passage? You want me to just take up the questions? How do you want to proceed? Shall we go ahead with the passage discussion? I'll give you 30 seconds. Quickly go through the paragraph, guys. Let me know once you're done. I'll take you to the next slide. And then we can probably discuss it together. Please take 30 seconds. Let's go ahead with this one. Okay, Rahul. Let me know once you're done reading. I'll take you to the next slide. Quick 30 seconds, guys. Please type it down in the chat box if you're done, and we can move ahead to the next one. All right, can we move ahead to the next slide? All right, please check this one out. Are you finding it tough to comprehend, guys? It's just a comparison between the two approaches, hard sell and soft sell. Please do not read every word of the sentences or the paragraph. Learn to skip. You should know where to skip, where to move to the next sentence or the next paragraph. You're not reading every sentence. All right? Just after you're done reading, I'll tell you the right approach of reading in case you're spending a lot of time on mugging up every word in the paragraph. Can we move ahead to the next one? Guys, quickly let me know if you're done reading. We'll move ahead. Okay, let me take you to the next one. I think we've spent enough time. This is the last paragraph, and then we discuss it. Let me know if you're done. Rahul, Vipin, everyone who's here with me. Please let me know in the chat box, guys, so that we can start discussing it. Yeah. All right. So enough time spent. Let's have a look at the strategy first. How should we read? So, guys, very important thing. First paragraph has to be read completely. Okay. Second, third, fourth, whatever the paragraph might be in between, right? These are the middle paragraphs. Just read first or first two lines. That's all you're supposed to read. And when it comes to the last paragraph, we read it completely, because that's where the tone of the author mostly comes into picture. The views and the opinion of the author comes into limelight, right? So this is the first paragraph. This is a window to the entire passage. So let's quickly go through it. Let's see what this holds for us, and then as we move ahead, we'll try to anticipate what can be there in the next paragraph. It says a key decision required for advertising managers is whether a hard sell or soft sell strategy is appropriate or for a specific target market. The hard sell approach involves the use of direct, forceful claims regarding the benefits of the advertised brand over competitors' offering. In contrast, what the soft sell is, it just talks about it, right? So we're talking about two approaches. We're talking about two approaches of selling, right? Of selling the equipments or anything. Basically, marketing, advertising is what we're talking about here. Two approaches. One of them is hard sell, right? And the other one is soft sell. So what does it mean to hard sell? Hard sell मतलब किसी चीज को बहुत ट्रांसपेरेंटली बेचना, ठीक है? You are forcing your equipment, your product, your service to your consumer. Whereas soft sell is another specific target market strategy wherein you're trying to subtly sell to the user. So hard sell approach involves the use of direct, forceful claims regarding the benefits of the advertised brand over competitors' offering. In contrast, the soft sell approach involves the use of advertising claims that imply superiority over more subtly, right? So when we say imply superiority more subtly, matlab what is superior, and that is very subtly shared. It's not transparent. Okay, it's not very explicit, not explicit. Okay, it's very implicitly shared that what we are trying to sell to you. Now it's the next paragraph. I would not be consuming the entire paragraph. I'll just read the first few lines and move to the next. Then it talks about one positive aspect of hard sell approach is this. I stopped reading it here. And then there's a very important term, however. So guys, another important thing to remember here is whenever you have terms like but, however, although, yet, nevertheless. Okay, what are we supposed to do with these terms? These are basically contradictory conjunctions. Okay, these are contradictory conjunctions. So whenever you have these terms, they will always and always provide a contradiction to what the tone has been set so far, or what the context has been set so far, right? Also, there's always a chance to expect a question whenever there's a tone change happening. You know, it is more like something was being said so far, and all of a sudden we see something negative popping in, right? So, more important part lies in wherein the tone started just getting convoluted or opposite to it, right? So, the moment the tone changes or we find any contradictory conjunction, we need to be a little more focused. We need to figure out that there might be a question from here. Why does it say, however, XYZ, right? So it says one positive aspect of hard sell approach is to use very simple, straightforward product claims presented as explicit conclusions with little room for confusion. So there's more of conclusion being stated explicitly and less of confusion left in the advertiser's message. However, some consumers may resent being told. So what are we doing? We are talking about hard sells, pros, and also we are counting on the cons. And what is important is the con side. However, some may show some resent being told that want to what to believe, and some may distrust the message, some may not even trust the message. So resentment and distrust is what it shows, right? And then overall it's also talking about what might happen in case of soft sell. So when it is giving us the pros and cons for hard sell, it should also tell us the soft sells pros and cons, right? That's what the passage does. We're talking about the pros, we're talking about the consequences of going for the soft sell approach. And the last paragraph says recent research on consumer memory and judgment suggests another advantage of implicit conclusions. Implicit means when we are talking about the soft sell approach. Okay. The implicit is a soft sell approach we are referring to here, right? So it says beliefs or conclusions that are self-generated are more accessible from memory than beliefs from conclusion. So why is soft sell better or not so better? That is what is stated. Moreover, self-generated beliefs are often perceived as more accurate and valid than the beliefs of others, because other individuals may be perceived as less knowledgeable or may be perceived as manipulative or deliberately misleading. So there it says self-generated beliefs means which is on the basis of what you believe to be true. That means when there's a room of confusion, there's a room for confusion, right? So moreover, self-generated beliefs are often perceived as more accurate. That's what on the basis of experience the author says that for him or her, whatever the consumer believes looking at a product is better than what the hard selling approach tells. So this is all about soft sell, and what implicit conclusions can lead to is what it states, right? So I hope this passage was clear to everyone, guys. Could you understand what this passage talks about? Yeah, Rahul and everybody, can we expect something? Can I expect some views of yours? Could you guys share your viewpoint about what the passage was about? Were you able to understand what was there which you did not understand, or if you want me to explain every line of the paragraph? It was an easy passage. All it talks about is the advertising managers, what they think about hard sell and soft sell strategy, what are the pros, what are the cons of soft sell and hard sell, and then why soft sell is still better approach, because it gives the self-generated beliefs. It leads to self-generated beliefs which are more accurately believed by a consumer rather than when it is something which is hardcorely consumer is made to believe, right? So let's discuss the general idea, the structure and tone, which I asked you to figure out before you move to the questions. Please have a look at the passage and help me out with the context. What is the general idea? What's a summary? How is each paragraph structured? And once done, what is the tone and title of the passage of the author in the passage? I've also given you some examples for tone today. So can you guys help me out with that? Yes. Passage was about advertising strategies like hard sell and soft sell, how both can be differentiated from each other. Yes. And does the author also advocate one of the approaches out of these two? Rahul? Does the author support any of the two, either of the two approaches? Or does he just describe the two or shares the pros and cons? That's it. What does the last paragraph do? It's good that we tried it, but the last paragraph also shares the viewpoint, right? The author wants to go for the soft sell approach. I'll just show you how it is structured. I'll read the entire paragraph for you now so that it makes clear. So recent research on consumer memory and judgment suggests another advantage of implicit conclusions. Now, implicit conclusion starts from soft sell. This paragraph is an extension of the second part of the first paragraph itself, where he talks about one positive approach of the hard sell approach is its use of very simple and straightforward product claims presented as explicit conclusion. So this is about hard sell with little room for confusion. Naturally, if product is being hard sold, as in if we talk about suppose tide, that tides, the whiteness of the cloth that is achieved by using tide is something which cannot be compared to any other product or any other detergent, right? So that's a hard sell approach where you're claiming that will definitely refine the whiteness of your cloth. The white shirts would get whiter, the white cloth gets whiter if you wash it with Tide, for example. So that's an explicit conclusion, and there's little room for confusion, right? However, some consumers may resent being told what to believe, and some may distrust the message. However, some might say कि नहीं यार हमने तो Rin Supreme use किया है, and that really is working wonders for us. We don't really need this product, and we doubt if this product can even be better than this, right? So there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of distrust in the message which is being given explicit through explicit conclusions or by hard sell approach. And then it also talks about further on resentment and distrust, that it often leads to counter argumentation. The consumer might also, you might have seen people claiming something about the product, and then that product gets a lot of backlash on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You might have seen that, on post, how the tone of the tone of the consumers gets very lampooning. When I say lampooning, it's basically criticizing people on social media in a written format, right? So you might have seen a lot of consumers lampooning about using a particular product and really not liking its services. And to boomerang effects. Boomerang मतलब आपने सोचा था कि इसका इफेक्ट ये जाएगा, but वो एकदम 360 degree या 180 degrees चला गया. Basically opposite to what you expected. So that's a boomerang effect, which consumers come to believe conclusions diametrically opposed to conclusions endorsed in advertising claims. So even if you do not know what is boomerang effect, the entire sentence actually explains what is boomerang effect as per the author here, right? By contrast, the risk of boomerang effects is greatly reduced with soft sell approach. Now the author is introducing the other approach, benefits and consequences. It says the negative points, the consequences of hard sell approach, where the explicit conclusions are taken with a lot of distrust and resentment by the consumers. There, on the hindsight, are balanced very much using the soft sell approach. One way to implement the soft sell approach is to provide information that implies the main conclusion the advertiser wants the consumer to draw, to leave the conclusions themselves unstated. That is what soft sell does. It does not explicitly state anything. It just gives you, a direction. It just gives you a viewpoint कि ऐसा कर सकते हैं. उसमें क्या करना है, क्या सोचना है, that is on the consumer to think around. So because consumers are invited to make up their own mind, they have to think. They have a lot of bandwidth to figure out, to imagine. That's why it says implicit conclusions. That reduces the risk of resentment, distrust, and counter argumentation. So which was a challenge in the first approach now becomes a benefit in the other one. And now it says that recent research on consumer memory and judgment suggests another advantage of implicit conclusion. So the author is advocating, he introduces the two approaches and then advocates soft sell approach. Okay, that's what it does. Beliefs or conclusions that are self-generated are more accessible from memory than beliefs from conclusions have a great impact on judgment and decision making. That's what it says. Moreover, self-generated beliefs are often perceived as more accurate and valid than the beliefs individuals may be perceived as less knowledgeable or may be perceived as manipulative or deliberately misleading. Right? So what it says is that recent research on consumer memory and judgment suggests another advantage. So there's another benefit of implicit conclusion. Beliefs or conclusions that are self-generated are more accessible from memory than beliefs from conclusion provided explicitly by other individuals. Moreover, if we talk about the self-generated beliefs, they are often perceived as more accurate. If we talk about the self-generated beliefs as in like what we believe to be true as per a certain soft sell approach, they are perceived as more accurate and more valid than the beliefs of others, because other individuals may be perceived as less knowledgeable. You might consider that the other individuals are not so the other individuals might have a different approach towards a certain soft sell strategy. So this leaves a lot of room for imagination rather than confusion, because other individuals may be perceived as less knowledgeable or may be perceived as manipulative or deliberately misleading. So when it is a self-generated belief, it's something when you are believing on the basis of what you saw very subtly. So you had a direction, you had a lot of bandwidth for imagination rather than just believing in what a hard sell approach might claim very explicitly, very transparently. You know that you have your own generated beliefs, which you would obviously believe to be better as compared to what someone else would proclaim in a hard sell approach. I hope it was clear what the entire passage talks about. Okay. Now, let's talk about the tone. Of course, the tone of the author is very analytical. He is comparing hard sell and soft sell strategy, and then goes ahead with promoting soft sell strategy. Okay. Now, let's have a look at these questions. Okay, there's just one more paragraph which we'll quickly go through. It says, despite these advantages, implicit conclusions may not always be more effective than explicit conclusion. So, after all, implicit conclusions may not always be more effective than explicit conclusions. One risk is that some consumers may fail to draw their own conclusion and thus miss the point of message. So, again, analysis is still going on. So, tone is very much analytical in the last paragraph, we could see. Another risk is that some consumers may draw conclusions other than the other intended, right? So, we have pros, we have cons, and still going on. Now, it is for the soft sell, right? Even if inferential activity is likely, there is no guarantee that the consumers will follow the path provided by the advertiser. So what direction might be there, the consumer might not always follow that. Finally, a third risk is that consumers may infer the intended conclusion but question the validity of their inference. They might not even think that what they're thinking is actually correct or not. Okay, now let's have a look at the question, guys. Please have a look at the first question. Let me know once you're done. I will discuss it right there. Let me know if you're done reading the question or if you have any doubts about the options, or if you want to refer the passage, I'll take you back to the passage, guys. Good, Rahul, that we could state so much about the passage when you read it just first time. Could you please help me with the options? What's the correct one? It can be inferred from the passage that one reason an advertiser might prefer a hard sell approach to a soft sell approach is that. So, for this, you should refer the last paragraph where he talks about that advantages there are. Like, there are advantages for implicit conclusion, but what is more about explicit conclusion? Why does the author tend to favor hard sell at the end, at the last, in the last paragraph? Please have a look at it and let me know if you're done with this. This is the question. Like, why would the passage, it says one reason that advertiser might prefer a hard sell approach to a soft sell approach. The risks of boomerang effects are minimized when the conclusion an advertiser wants the consumer to draw are themselves left unstated. So, can we say that conclusions are left unstated in a hard sell approach? Risk of boomerang effects are minimized when the conclusions an advertiser wants the consumer to draw are themselves left unstated. No, he would state it in that, right? Counter argumentation is likely from consumers who fail to draw their own conclusions regarding an advertising claims. It's not about where the hard sell approach comes from. It's the basically counter argumentation is the result of it, right? It's a consequence of it. Inferential activity is likely to occur even if consumers perceive themselves to be more knowledgeable than the individuals. This cannot be there because inferential side happens in the case of soft sell approach. Research on consumer memory suggests that the explicit conclusions provided by advertiser using hard sell approach have a significant impact on decision making. This could be there that decision making is improved. They have very limited room for confusion and limited room for any kind of imagination. That's why whatever the message is in the hard sell approach, is exactly what the hard sell product, through the marketing would basically direct the consumer to. So consumer would not have any bandwidth to get confused or imagine, what the hard sell might intend to say, because the intention itself is very transparently stated. And he says the information presented by an advisor using the soft sell approach may imply different conclusions to different consumers. No. Information presented by an advisor using the soft sell approach may imply different conclusions to different consumers. Okay. Let's keep D and E and tell me which is the better choice out of the two. C is not the answer. We just eliminated that, Rahul, because it says inferential activity is likely to occur even if the consumers perceive. But we're not talking about what soft sell approach might do. We're talking about why would we want to go for hard sell approach. Okay, what's the benefit of going for hard sell approach? So is it D? Research on consumer memory suggests that explicit conclusions provided by an advisor using hard sell approach have a significant impact on decision making. Or is it E? Information presented by an advisor using the soft sell approach may imply different conclusions to different consumers. Of course, this is telling me the consequence of soft sell approach. This is telling me the benefit of hard sell approach, right? So instead of choosing a consequence of soft sell approach, I should choose benefit, right? So D is a better choice over E. If this is clear, more appropriate. Why more appropriate? Because it talks about the benefit of hard sell approach. So naturally, this is favored over E. Any doubts in this, guys? Anything we are still confused about? I hope, since it's a hard sell way of telling you that D is a better choice, you have a stronger decision making happening, right? So D is the choice we're picking up. Let's check this one. Now be very careful when the question stem comes up with an emboldened except in caps. Okay, each of the following is mentioned in the passage as a characteristic of hard sell approach except. Please have a look at this one and then we discuss it. All right, let's have a look at it. Each of the following is mentioned in the passage except, as a characteristic of hard sell. So what is not a characteristic could be your answer. Okay. Its overall message is rarely grasped. The message itself is not grasped. Okay. Let me hold it because I want to say that message is grasped in case of hard sell. B says it appeals to consumers' knowledge about the product. It appeals, yes, it appeals to the consumer's knowledge, right? Because that is when the decision making gets impacted. So this is a characteristic, therefore it's not my answer because I'm looking for something which is not a characteristic. Since it says following is mentioned in the passage as characters of the hard sell, except, right? So we are looking for a characteristic which is not a part of hard sell approach or something which is not a characteristic of hard sell approach. Okay, so since B is something which can be considered as a characteristic of hard sell approach, we are eliminating the option. Okay, coming on to C. It makes two explicit claims that advertised brand is superior to other brands. Yes, I mean, makes two explicit claims. Yes, it is very transparent. Advertised brand is superior. Yes, if it is, that's why it might cause a lot of resentment, it says, right? The passage talks about a lot of resentment which is caused in the consumers in case of consumers thinking that, we just don't agree to it. And then eventually leading to counter argumentation as well, right? So resentment or counter argumentation, as the passage states, yes, it can lead to it. Therefore, it's not my answer choice. It is a characteristic, not the one to be picked. It uses statements that are expressed very clearly. What about D? It uses statements that are expressed very clearly. Yes, this is a characteristic, so not my answer. Makes claims in the form of direct conclusions. What about E, guys? Yes, there are direct conclusions. So this is also stated. Therefore, not my answer choice. So eventually, I'm left with A, which I held on. Its overall message readily grasped. Okay, it's readily grasped, right? So readily grasped is also fine. Therefore, not the answer. Appeals to consumers' knowledge about the product. Yes, it can be. Makes two explicit claims that its brand is superior to other brands. User statements are expressed very clearly. Definitely yes. Makes claims in the form of direct conclusions. Definitely yes. So B or C, what is the answer? Appeals to consumers' knowledge about the product. It should be. Makes two explicit claims that the advertised brand is superior to other brands. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about C rather. I mistakenly read it as rarely grasped. So it is readily, so it's definitely there. And when I look at B and C, of course, C seems to be better because consumers' knowledge, yes, it has to appeal to consumers' knowledge. So C is a better choice, guys. Rahul, yes, it is readily grasped. So A should not be the answer. C should be the one. Okay, mistakenly read it as overall messages rarely grasped. It is readily grasped and therefore it is correct. Therefore, it is the characteristic. We're looking for something which is not a characteristic, which is there in option C. Makes two explicit claims that advertised brand is superior to the other brand. So we're not sure. It's always trying to make it superior to others. Right? All right. So it should be C. Can we move ahead to the next question now? Please have a look at this one. All right, Rahul, let's have a look at it together. So what it states is, it can be inferred from the passage that advertisers could reduce one of the risks discussed in the last paragraph if they were able to provide, right? So the moment you read in the last paragraph, if they were able to provide, right? One thing is, the moment you read, certain thing about a certain paragraph, you should know that it's a local question. Okay? And of course, it's always good to refer the paragraph in case needed. And then we'll also have to anticipate. Since the question says, it says if they were able to provide what? Right? So what is that? What is missing? That the advertisers could reduce one of the risks. Okay. So what is the risk mentioned in the last paragraph? We need to check that. So last paragraph talks about, despite these advantages, implicit conclusion may not always be more effective than explicit conclusions. And then it says one risk is that. One risk is that some consumers may fail to draw their own conclusions and thus miss the point of the message, right? So what it's referring is that you might altogether miss on the point of the message itself, right? You might miss on why the, what exactly is the intention of the message here, if it is an implicit conclusion. So if it is an inferential activity, it might lead to something else as per your perception. So it's likely only when consumers are motivated and able to engage in effortful cognitive processes. So here the author is trying to compare and rather talk about the advantages of hard sell, right, as compared to soft sell. Did you see this? Because now we're talking about all the consequences of soft sell approach. That if a consumer is made to imagine what the advertising is subtly stated, with a lot of bandwidth to imply, bandwidth or implicit calculation and deriving a message out of the messaging which is there in the advertisement, right? That might lead to a lot of inferential activity and is likely only when consumers are motivated and able to engage in effortful cognitive process. So now they have to actually effortfully get into thinking around, what this message might be, right? So another risk is that some consumers may draw conclusions other than one intended. So if the consumer gets drifted away, if the consumer gets discursed from what was stated and what was intended, then entirely the entire approach itself fails, right? So even if inferential activity is likely, there is no guarantee that consumers will follow the path provided by the advertiser. And finally, a third risk is that consumers may infer intended conclusion but question the validity of their own inference. That is also a problem, right? So they're talking about three risks here. And what is the question about? It says it can be inferred from the passage that advertisers could reduce one of the risks discussed in the last paragraph. So it's about three risks we know, right? What are the three risks it talks about? That failing to draw their own conclusion, one, right? I'll just remove the rest of it so that things become very clear for you. So what are we talking about? One risk is that some consumers may fail to draw their own conclusions, right? This is risk number one. Second says miss the point of the message. That's a part of the risk itself. Another risk is some consumers may draw conclusions other than one intended. One, they do not get the conclusion itself. Second, concluding something else. And the third is consumers may infer the intended conclusion but question the validity of their inference. That is the third risk. So three risks have been mentioned. Now the question is, which of the following could reduce one of the risks, right? So A says motivation for consumers to think. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to negotiate on those risks. So we have to figure out one way of negotiating on one of those risks. Yeah, if the conclusion is left unstated, consumers are likely to get confused. So would you like to reconsider the option, Rahul? Would you want to refer the question again and see? Because I've just referred the passage for you again. We've read the entire paragraph again and figured out three risks involved. Would you like to reconsider and answer? Should I give you 30 seconds? Yeah? Yeah. Please quickly take 30 seconds, 40 seconds, whatever time you need. In case you still want to refer the passage, I'll take you back. But try to figure out which of the options will help out in eliminating that risk out of the three risks. Okay? Yeah. Okay, I'll take you back to the passage. Can we move back, Rahul, now? Can we move to the question? Okay. Very good, Rahul. Yes, it has to be A. Okay, let's have a look at it. Why should it be A? So we have to figure out one of the ways so that the risks gets reduced, right? One of the ways so that we can reduce one of the risks stated in the passage. Opportunity for consumers to generate their own beliefs or conclusions. So whatever the risks have been stated, there is an opportunity for consumers to generate their own beliefs, right? That is already there. So that's one of the risks. And it doesn't help. Opportunity for consumers, like if we provide them opportunity to generate their own beliefs, it doesn't help in negotiating the risk. So E can be eliminated. Information comparing the advertised product with its competitors. How would it help comparing it with the competitors? It doesn't impact. Subtle evidence that advertised product is superior to that of the competitors? No, we're not comparing. And even if you give evidence that this product is better than competitors, does it anyway negotiate the risk? No. The problem is that the consumers do not have enough motivation to think around what exactly is the messaging. The paragraph says that inferential activity can be misleading only when consumers are motivated and able to engage in effortful cognitive process. And option A says that motivation for consumers to think about the advertisement's message. So A should be the correct answer. B says information that implies the advertisement's intended conclusion but leaves that the conclusion unstated. If the conclusion is unstated, that's what the implicit messaging does. That's what soft sell does. Soft sell strategy. So what we're lacking here is a motivation for the consumers to actually have that cognitive behavior, cognitive thinking, right? Cognitive inclination. That is what the paragraph talks about. Inferential activity for cognitive, effortful cognitive process, right? So that is what is needed. We are requiring effortful cognitive processing of message, intended message rather, right? So A is the better choice. Okay, now this question type is very simple, but at the same time very tricky to deal with. I told you there are two types of questions. One of them is the main idea question, and the other one is the primary purpose question. Okay, so both are equally important, but both are very different. When I say main idea, this is more like the gist of the passage, this is more like the central idea of the passage. Okay, and when I'm referring to primary purpose, this is like why the passage has been written, what is the purpose of the passage, this is what is mentioned in the passage, right? So what you're trying to figure out from the primary purpose is why of the passage, like why is the passage been written. Please have a look at the question and let me know once you're done. I'll discuss it once you are also done picking up the options. All right. Risks and disadvantages are both being discussed. So it could be maybe A or E. All right, Rahul. So A says point out the risks involved in the use of a particular advertising strategy. It does point out the risks, but is it only referring to the risks? B says make a case or the superiority of one advertising strategy over another. So one is not better than other, but we are actually comparing pros and cons of both. Illustrate the ways in which two advertising strategies may be implemented. No, it's not about how they can be implemented. It is about why they cannot be implemented or why they can be implemented. So how is not the answer, right? C answers the how, which is not the answer here. This can definitely be eliminated. Present the advantages and disadvantages of two advertising strategies. Yes, that is what it does. It does talk about advantages and disadvantages of the two advertising strategies. Contrast the types of target markets. How are we referring to target markets? No. Point out the risk involved. It's not referring to just the risks. It's actually telling us the pros and cons of two advertising strategies. So D is actually the correct answer choice. All right, Rahul, is it clear why D is the right answer? Please have a look at the options. Verify why did we go for D? Quick 30 seconds. Yeah, perfect. All right. So we'll quickly also check out two short questions for your grammar before we wind up the day. I hope the screen is visible and the question is also visible. I won't say that to him if I dash you. Was, am, would be, were. What should we use here? This was about RC. Let's quickly check 2-3 questions on grammar before we call it a day. Why were here? Why cannot be? Why can't we use was here? Because it is a conditional question, right? This is a conditional tense where you are hypothetically considering a situation. I'm presuming that something could be like this. So I, were, you is the correct answer, not was. Also, I is always considered to be plural. So this is something which will never happen, right? You were just assuming that if this were true, then this would happen. I won't say that to him if I were you. So what is the correct answer choice? Not would be, not am, not was. Yeah, if you were in others position, right? Okay, try this one out. I dashed to Germany last year. We'll be discussing the total entire, table for tenses in the next session. But this is just to give you a quick nugget on, what tenses questions might look like. Very simple, very basic question. I dashed to Germany last year. Good, of course, cannot be the option. Gone, I had gone, I go is like for simple present tense. So it should be went, go, went, gone. So we're using simple past tense here. What is the tense of the sentence? It is simple past because you're using verb's second form, right? Sentence is went, so we're using second form, so it should be simple past tense. All right, last one. Winters here, dash be ready cold sometimes, so make sure you bring warm clothes. What is the answer? We can't use might, we cannot be using may. Can be, we're talking about the capability of winters here. Not might. Might be really cold sometimes, no. Can be really cold. Can is used for capability. So these are all modals. Okay, can, could, should, may, might, ought to, these are all modals. So we're going for can here. Winters here can be really cold sometimes, so make sure you bring warm clothes. So B, Bombay is the correct answer choice. Okay, guys, so we'll be covering up more passages in the next session. right? We'll be covering up this passage, which we haven't covered so far, and also maybe another passage of one paragraph we have, right? If you want, you can take a snap of it. We'll be discussing this passage in the next class. Modals हम next class में करते राहुल. Can, could, shall, should, when to use what, वो भी हम करते. ठीक है, this is for your homework. Quickly check this question out as well, and then we discuss it when we meet next. All right. Thank you so very much, guys. See you very soon, maybe on coming Sunday. And we'll be discussing some grammar nuggets along with some RCs, which we have one shared for your homework, two maybe from fresh RC as well. All right. Good night and see you very soon. Thank you so very much for attending the session, guys.